Welcome to Classic Picks of 86. Today we'll be looking at the Wilson Sting Midsize 85, which came out around 1983. Joining in the hit is Ben. He was featured in the other video where we reviewed the Wilson Pro Staff. I recall that this racket was very popular back in the 80s. It was like one of those rackets that almost everyone used. I thought at the time it was the cheaper version of the Wilson Pro Staff. It came out around the same time, maybe just slightly earlier. I recall also an ad where it compared itself, of course, favorably to the Prince Graphite. The selling point was, even though they were similar rackets, the Wilson Sting was cheaper. A unique kind of feature that a lot of rackets did not have at the time was the reverse bridge. It was supposed to make the racket more stable and stiffer, and I tend to agree with that. It feels pretty solid. It does have the flex that's common in these graphite rackets of the 80s, yet it did have a firmness. Not as firm as the Wilson Pro Staff, but still it has nice plow, nice power for such a thin beam. It's a constant thin beam. I think it's something like a 19mm beam, somewhere around there. The Wilson Sting series came in many different variations. There was a standard size, there was the mid-size, and then there was the oversize. And also there are various versions of the Sting. There was the original Sting without the bumper guard, then it came out with a bumper guard. Actually, there was a Sting that didn't have the bridge too. There was a Sting that didn't have the PWS, the perimeter weighting system. And then a little bit later on, there was a Sting 2, which had, instead of blue accents, it had red accents. And also there was a SC 2000. The SC stood for Sting Ceramic, and it was white in color. For some reason, the rackets from the 80s that were ceramic were white in color. I'm pretty sure the actual makeup of ceramic, in terms of the color, isn't white, but the manufacturers did it that way. It made it identifiable, I guess. There were also wide body models of the Sting when the craze for wide body models hit in the late 80s into the 90s. This was the high beam version of the Sting. As I recall, not many pros played with the Sting back in the 80s. I do believe that John Lloyd used it, and one of my actual favorite players back in the 80s, great serve and volleyer and Stanford alum Scott Davis used it. Other than those two, I don't recall anybody else using it. In terms of playability, what I really find that stands out is that it has a nice launch angle. It has a 16 by 18 string pattern, which is kind of unique. I thought it would have the same as the Pro Staff 6.0, which is 16 by 19, but this one is a little bit more open, and it allows for the ball to be hit a little bit deeper. Also allows for a little bit more spin. I always thought that Wilson's PWS was a gimmicky thing, but with this racket, it's pretty stable. I'm not sure if it's because of the PWS, not sure if it's because of the reverse bridge or the graphite structure of it, but it is nice and stable, especially at net. And even though by modern standards, it has a high static weight, it's still pretty maneuverable at the net, and volleys feel really crisp. As I remember, I really didn't like the Wilson Sting when it came out. Again, a lot of my friends had it and played with it, including my doubles partner in high school. I always thought it was one-dimensional back in the day, but hitting with it today, I really enjoy playing with it. I think I would be able to transition very easily to it from my head graphite edge. However, looking at some reviews in recent years, there were plenty that I ran into that weren't so flattering, and some were just downright nasty. So, mileage may vary. Let's check out what Ben has to say about the Sting. All right, Ben, what you think about the Wilson Sting?
All right, Wilson Sting, predecessor to the Wilson Pro Staff. It already has the PWS perimeter weight system that the Pro Staff had. This was an old standby in high school, 80s, early 90s racket. Felt good swinging with it. Had some decent flex that was not too much. That was easier on the arm. Definitely could swing through my strokes, like my backhand slice. I could really cut at the ball, and the ball would stay in. Lighter than the heavier the older 80s racket, so it was easier to get my timing compared to my Wilson blade, which is what I use normally.
Could you play a match with this thing?
Maybe not a USTA match.
Okay.
But I'd play a match, yeah. It felt good. Didn't get to try out my volleys, but maybe next time.
Okay.
Thumbs up for the Wilson Sting.
Oh, thumbs up. All right, thanks, Ben.